you get so big that you hold of this kind?
Hey guys, YodaBauer here, exploring the Last Jedi Blu-ray. I wanted to give you some thoughts on the deleted scenes from the film, but I'm gonna kind of go through each one and talk a little bit about, do I think it's a good thing they were cut? Do I think it's a bad thing they were cut? Blah, blah, blah. The first deleted scene we get is an alternate opening to the film. I ultimately think what we got in The Last Jedi was better. We started on the ground and then kind of got up into space, and it felt like you were leaving the planet with the Resistance. This was kind of a clever idea. I totally get the logic behind it. So in the alternate opening, you start with Finn a lot sooner. Like, he's the first person you see, and I can certainly relate to wanting to start the movie with, you know, a familiar figure, a familiar face, as opposed to, I mean, not that we don't know the people we see right at the beginning of the film, but just to kind of establish right away that we're with our main characters. But I actually think it's stronger that we don't start with our main characters and that we find them a little bit later, and it kind of helps with that tension. The other thing about this scene is it establishes Poe in kind of this leadership type role earlier, which on the one hand adds a little bit more sense to why he thinks that his opinion matters to Admiral Holdo, because he feels like he's in more of a leadership position. But I think it's a little bit weird because we would see him, you know, on the bridge, and then suddenly we see him in space. And I don't know, I think overall not seeing Poe until he's in the X-Wing is better. So this is kind of one where obviously it's not so much deleted as it says alternate opening. It's an alternate, and I think they made the better choice with what was in the film. So the second deleted scene is called Paige's gun jams. So Paige is Rose's sister. This scene does a lot for establishing Paige as a character. It establishes the medallion a little bit more prominently. To be honest, though, Paige as a character matters insofar as she matters to Rose. Rose is the important character of the two of them. So if this scene was in the film, I don't think it would have taken away anything. I don't think it would have been a bad thing, but I don't think it was necessary. We certainly get that Paige matters to Rose, and we didn't necessarily need that explained more. This might make us feel a loss for Paige, but we also don't really know that she's important. At this point, you know, we're watching all kinds of people die in this opening battle. Paige is another character that dies in this opening battle. She doesn't really matter until we realize she's Rose's sister. I mean, when I watched The Last Jedi, I was completely caught up in the drama of her trying to save the day, but I didn't think of it as a named character who matters. She was another nameless but brave hero of the good guys. I think this is the type of scene that writers put in the story when they know why a character matters, but we as an audience don't know why they matter. And it's something where you kind of come to see that it isn't important to somebody who doesn't know who the character is. Other than maybe how it could have affected the pacing, wouldn't have minded if this scene was in there. Don't really miss it not being in there. So the third scene is a scene that a lot of fans complained wasn't in the movie, and that's Luke reacting to Han's death. As a fan of Star Wars, and as a fan who would watch a Star Wars movie, even if the pacing was terrible, I love this scene, and I would have loved to see this. But we didn't necessarily need it. I like what we have in The Last Jedi. I like that Luke goes, "Where's Han?" And, you know, then it cuts to Kylo. Now, this scene is, of course, a little bit later. It basically would be Rey comes back, says the whole spiel, blah, 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 First Order's trying to take over, and we need Luke. And then instead of Luke walking away, Luke's sitting there, and he's kind of thinking about Han, and Leia's kind of thinking about Han. I like seeing Luke mourn Han, but to be completely honest, I know what it would look like for Luke to mourn Han. I didn't need to see that in The Last Jedi. Now, I don't know, I haven't seen this in the long cut, I don't know what it would have done pacing-wise, but what I honestly think is weaker about this sequence is Luke having this shared moment with Leia. Now, there's nothing on screen that implies that he's actually having a Force psychic connection with Leia. There's nothing that says that Leia can sense him. But I really like that the first time that Luke and Leia have any kind of connection at all is just before Rey's dark side cave scene. Luke sits down, meditates in the Force for the first time in a long time. Right? Rey has said that Luke has cut himself off from the Force. Luke is opening himself up to the Force for the first time in years and reaches out to Leia, who's in a coma, and his reaching out to her is part of what helps her wake up from her coma so she can be awake and stop Poe from being an idiot and all of this stuff. And I like the beauty of that moment. And again, it comes down to, it's a scene that makes sense from a writer's perspective or from the perspective of something we would know having seen the film. But when you're sitting down and you're watching it for the first time, for the good of the film, we don't know that Luke has cut himself off from the Force yet. And I think it's better to not have a connection between Luke and Leia until later on in the film when it's going to matter more. To that extent, I'm actually glad the scene was cut, not because of Luke's mourning, but because I like waiting to see Luke and Leia together. I think it matters more as a payoff. This is a closed off Luke Skywalker, and I think it's better that he remained closed off for so long. So the next scene is Poe finding Finn, getting him caught up on everything that's happened while Finn was out of it, and then eventually giving Poe giving Finn back the jacket all sewn up. And it explains, how Finn got his jacket fixed. This is a really cute scene, and it's a really cute scene, especially if you're a Poe Finn shipper. And it's really funny because Rian Johnson, in his commentary for this scene, said that he was specifically referencing Empire Strikes Back by having people walk in between Finn and Poe in the way people walked in between Han and Leia and Hoth. And I think that would just really lead a lot of evidence to the Poe Finn shippers, and maybe, for what that's worth. I don't know if that's what Ryan was going for, but I think that's kind of funny. This scene is cute, but again, not really needed. This scene, I think, is kind of funny. So it's Finn trying to figure out what he's going to do next, and BB-8 shows him the scene of Rey saying goodbye from The Force Awakens. And Finn goes, "It's kind of creepy that you recorded that, but thanks." So I like this from the perspective of it, puts BB-8 in the R2-D2 role of him, showing the holo projection to spark the hero into doing hero things. It's also very T3M4 from KOTOR 2. It creates a parallel because R2-D2 does the same thing to Luke later in the movie, but I think it creates an unnecessary parallel. At no point are we really trying to connect Finn and Luke as being the same character type. The line, "It's kind of creepy that you recorded that," is funny, but it's also kind of a self-awareness type of line. Star Wars just doesn't really have lampshade lines a whole lot. I mean, I guess it has some, but it's really not its main thing. So I thought this was kind of a funny scene, and I liked it, but I don't think we needed it to be funny where it was. So Caretaker sizing Rey up is kind of the same thing. We get so much interaction between the Caretakers and Rey, and it's funny, and it's some of the highlights of the scenes in Octo. This is just another one. It's just more of stuff that they already had. It's basically a scene cutting redundancies. It's funny, but it's redundancies. If we could get an extended cut of The Last Jedi in the same way they made, extended cuts of Lord of the Rings, this would absolutely be a scene I'd love to have in it, but if something has to go, it can be this. Again, I know a lot of these are just little 30-second scenes, and it probably doesn't feel like a lot, but those 30 seconds add up. Even right now, as I watch, how much time I've spent talking, I see 30 seconds adding up. So the Caretaker Village sequence, I love this sequence. I'm actually the most sad that this isn't in the movie, but I also completely understand why it's cut. It's obviously the missing third test from the film, and a lot of people noticed the missing third test. I don't think it's really a problem that there was a missing third test because Luke didn't finish his training on Dagobah, and now Rey doesn't finish her training on Octo, and I really like the kind of parallel with that and how that ended up. but I thought this was cute. When I was watching this for the first time, I was upset at the beginning of the scene where Luke is like, half of those Jedi books will tell you not to go do anything, because if you can't maintain balance, you shouldn't go do it. And it upset me because that's wrong. That's not Jedi philosophy. That's Kreia from Knights of the Old Republic 2. That's not an actual Jedi teaching. And it's just like, Luke, what are you doing? And then to have it not be the point of the test, I thought was a really good reversal. It was just funny, and it was a kind of humor that I feel like wasn't in the film anywhere else. You know, Rey walks in, and then like the caretaker lady's like twirling the thing to be like, look, we twirl the things. Like there's this language barrier, so she's like fake partying to explain that they're partying. I loved everything about it. Where I think it would hurt the film if it was in it is it's the only time you really see Luke happy during Rey's training. Luke is supposed to be this insular, he's over everything, he's sad, he's burdened. I liked seeing him lighter and happier, but I liked seeing him lighter and happier from the same place where I wanted to see him as the legend of Luke Skywalker who didn't become a recluse hiding on an island. To the extent that I liked the scene because it wasn't the Luke we got in the movie, and I liked seeing Luke as how I always imagined him. While I liked it, I think it would have created a character inconsistency within Luke that would have ultimately been worse for the film. It does kind of explain why Rey is so upset with Luke, seemingly out of nowhere, and it does explain why Rey is kind of like walking around the island huffy. But at the same time, you don't really need that. You get enough of her own frustration with Luke refusing to teach her a lesson. And this is really the only lesson he teaches her. Like, first lesson, she meditates. Second lesson is grumpy uncle at a holiday party telling you about all the people that run the government wrong. But she never really gets any lessons from Luke. And I also really like that. I like that Rey doesn't get any lessons from Luke. That Luke is he's supposed to be Yoda, he's supposed to be Obi-Wan, and he fails on those accounts because he doesn't actually teach Rey anything. Here, this teaches Rey something. It teaches her to be her own hero and not wait on the curmudgeonly old man. As much as I will probably watch this scene many times because I think it's great, I think it's for the best that it wasn't in the movie. But if I could add any of the deleted scenes back into the movie, that said, it would be this, because I did really, really enjoy it. So extended Fathier chase, I'm not really going to talk about this long. This makes me feel like, you know, on the Phantom Menace DVDs, you can get the extended pod race scene, and they're great if you want to watch more pod racing. And I'm not knocking pod racing, I think that's a great sequence, but it didn't need to be any longer, and the Fathier chase didn't need to be any longer than it was. So another extended version is Finn and Rose and DJ going through the Supremacy, pretending to be Imperial officers. The best part of this sequence is honestly seeing Kylo Ren at the beginning, presumably waiting for either for Rey to arrive or for him to take Rey to see Snoke, depending on how this would have been cut if the full sequence was left in. That's the best part. Any part where we get more Kylo is the best part. The rest of it is good. If this movie was more about Finn and Rose's journey and less about Kylo and Rey's journey, this would have been absolutely necessary and great. What it does is it makes the movie about not the characters that the movie was ultimately about. I have a video on Finn and his journey and what Canto Bight means to The Last Jedi, and in it I basically talk about how Finn's story gets lost in the hypnotic story that is Rey and Kylo's. And as much as I feel sad about that, because Finn is one of my favorite characters, at the end of the day, it was more captivating to watch Rey and Kylo, and I'm not going to complain about that. So this would have been great in the movie where Finn is the main character, but really, Rey is the main character, so that's why this had to get shaved down. That said, I liked everything in this sequence. A couple of people in Port Haven weren't a big fan of the stormtrooper that talks to Finn towards the end. He has an American Southern accent. That didn't really bother me. Just, even though we haven't really heard that in Star Wars a whole lot, so it was a little bit jarring, it's still not like Star Wars doesn't have other Earth accents in it. And just because that's the accent the actor used on set doesn't mean that that's what they would have used in post anyway. But yeah, that's really where I'm at. Is I think it's a great sequence. I really liked everything in it, but it was ultimately unnecessary because just by the nature of the beast and how the film had to go, this movie was not about Finn and Rose. It was, even though they were important parts of it, it's really more about Rey and Kylo. That's where the edit went, and that makes sense. Similarly, the next scene is Rose biting Hux on the hand. This is one where I'm kind of glad this wasn't in it. It really affects Rose's character. So, obviously Rose is upset, very upset. Her sister has been murdered by these people, and now they're holding her captive. It's a very human response to want to bite Hux on the hand, but it takes Rose to an aggressor. And I think Rose is better not as an aggressive character. Yes, in the Canto Bite sequence, they're tearing up the town, but there's a difference between property damage and, like, attacking another human being. And even though she has every right to attack Hux, even though Hux does not deserve any kind of pity, I just think it's better to let Rose be more of this innocent character. Also, I'm not gonna lie, I really just enjoy watching Kylo beat the crap out of Hux, and I just don't want to watch somebody else do it. So the extended fight between Phasma and Finn. So this might actually be the scene I would put back in more than the caretakers. I really liked Finn calling Phasma out for being a turncoat, and I liked seeing Phasma for the survivor that she is. I've read the Phasma comic, I've read the Phasma novel. Phasma would do anything to survive. I loved seeing that happen. As a Phasma fan, I just felt justified watching it. But then when I think about it, Phasma doesn't need to be justified to anyone. I understand a lot of people feel let down about Phasma as a character, but at the end of the day, you feel let down as Phasma as a character because there was the expectation there that she's going to be more. Like, all we really knew about Phasma is that she was going to be a stormtrooper with different armor. And at some level, Phasma being a woman makes her different because we've never seen a female stormtrooper before. So we had these elements, and people were like, because she has different armor, and because she's a woman, she's going to do these things. And she just didn't. I've long held that if Phasma was played by a nobody actress instead of Gwendolyn Christie, no one would have given a crap, and no one would think Phasma's a waste. It's because they hired a name people knew that they expected more. And that's not unfair, but I don't think the movie... If something had to go, if something had to be shortened, then I think you can shorten Phasma, because at the end of the day, The Last Jedi is not about proving that Phasma wasn't a waste of a character, because she really isn't. She's another Imperial, the same as any other Imperial who gets a line. It's just, she's played by an actor you've heard of, and that's really the difference. So the EU fan in me wanted this scene because it's reflecting something I know about a character that I've only seen in the expanded universe. But again, for a movie that stands on its own 2 feet, doesn't really matter. There's a scene of Rose and Finn leaving the Supremacy. Rose looks at Finn and says, "So where are we going?" Finn responds, "Where we belong." This scene absolutely did not need to be in the movie in any way, doesn't add anything, doesn't do anything. I can see why when you're sitting there writing the screenplay, you would think this scene is needed. It ties into Finn's arc. Finn was always running. He was always trying to get away to save Rey. Now Finn has kind of forgone worrying about Rey more than anybody else and has decided to worry about the Resistance more than anybody else. And so this is a scene of Rose not really asking, "Where are we going?" She's asking, "So whose side are you on?" And Finn's really saying, "I'm on the side of the Resistance." But we already got that when he says rebel scum to Phasma. We don't need it again. And it really just has the implication that Rose hasn't noticed any changes in Finn that have happened. And I can see why this is cut. The next one is incredibly short. It's Rey and Chewie on the Falcon. They're trying to find the Resistance. They see the First Order attacking Luke with the big explosion, and they're like, we're gonna try the back door and fly away. It's a funny moment, and it's a cute moment, but it would have completely killed the moment, because it's the moment where the First Order is shooting down what we will later learn is projection Luke Skywalker. It would have been cute to have a moment like this somewhere else in that sequence, but it didn't need to be there. And then finally, the last one on here is more Canto Bite stuff. It's just costumes and creatures of Canto Bight. Totally get why you'd want to put this on the DVD, and it's fun having it on the DVD because it's fun seeing all the stuff that got cut. But Canto Bight didn't need to be longer. It was kind of long as it was, especially considering everything about Canto Bight was a red herring. So yeah, that's all the deleted scenes that are on here, what I kind of think about it. I was kind of going back and forth on it, but I think ultimately, if I was going to put anything back in the film, it would be that third test with the Caretaker Village, just because I get such joy and glee out of watching it. But again, totally understand why it's cut, especially because it's one of the longer deleted sequences, and I'm sure it put a lot of time back in the movie, and I think The Last Jedi is better for it. Like I said, I think it would create internal conflict of character, or confliction of characters, and I think it's for the best that it was cut, but it's probably, of any of the deleted scenes, the one that I'm gonna just, like, watch again, because I like it. Other than that, again, just calling out Phasma, but, I mean, both of those are just my EU side talking. It's the fan that wants to see all of the webs connected, and there's nothing wrong with that. I am that person. I'm not knocking myself, and I'm not knocking anyone who feels that way. But The Last Jedi does have to stand on The Last Jedi's own feet, and both of those sequences, while they build a bigger universe, take away from the film itself. Otherwise, all of the scenes are kind of cool to see, but I don't think really needed to be in there, and that's ultimately how it works. You know, deleted scenes are deleted for a reason, and I am so happy I got to see these, but I think seeing these now, I think we really did get the best cut of The Last Jedi that we could have had. So that's my breakdown of this. What do you think about the deleted scenes? What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? What do you wish was added in? If there's any other features on the Blu-ray you'd like me to talk about, let me know and I'll talk to you about it. But until next time, keep it real and fly casually.
Cooking can be fun!